Welcome to the LSI Behind the Wind podcast. I'm Jerry Slatter. For 30 years, I've dedicated my life to the science of business development. This is episode 2, and I'm excited to have Catherine join me, Catherine Slatter. And we thought a lot about this first episode with a guest joining me, and both our team and I came up with this idea that this would be an interesting discussion to have with Catherine. She's got an interesting perspective on business development and also an interesting perspective on the company. So Catherine, thanks for joining me. And let's start out just talking about your career and some of your history prior to joining the company.
Okay, so I joined the aerospace industry. Wasn't the first job that I had out of college, but was very close to it. I started my career at General Motors. I'm originally from Michigan, so that's kind of the thing to do when you're from Michigan. Quickly decided I didn't like General Motors and decided to find a different job. And I was living in Ohio at the time, and saw a posting for a position with a company called Goodrich Aerospace, which I knew nothing about. So threw my name in the hat and ended up getting a position there as a financial analyst. And that was with their wheel and brake division. And I quickly kind of moved up the ranks within Goodrich and moved over to another division, the landing gear division. Had multiple positions with the company until I decided to leave in 2004. And at that time, I was the A380 landing gear program manager.
So you did move into business development prior to leaving Goodrich. Talk about, you worked for a common friend of ours, and talk about what your early career looked like in business development.
So like I mentioned, my first job with Goodrich was a financial analyst, and I worked with the sales team. So what I would do is I would be in the office, they'd be out selling, and they'd call me and I'd do all the price modeling for them. And they decided that I was more of a sales and marketing type person than I was a financial person. So I was pulled away from finance and moved into a marketing role. And I worked for the wheel and brake services division, mainly on the side of commercial wheel and brake services. But then once again, I was recognized as somebody that had some potential and was pulled over into doing sales on the landing gear overhaul in the military division, what we call the military division, which I knew nothing about at all. So I was brought to Utah with, Sean mentioned our mutual friend, Barry Beffert, who I kind of worked for. He led the military sales division, and he brought me to Utah. That was the first time I guess the second time I met Sean, but came out and Sean explained to me how the military market worked. And I had the pleasure of meeting various people within the organization and seeing the office of LSI. And that's kind of how it was my first big connection with LSI.
So just to level set this a bit, the company, which is now part of Raytheon, but at the time it was a Fortune 500 company, you had responsibility for the company's, one of their largest divisions, and had moved into this role of business development. Eventually, you went on to work under and support the largest program the company ever had pursued and then won, the Airbus A380 program. So when you were first starting your career in this path down business development, I remember you were working with our team on some of the market analysis and looking at a lot of some of the early strategy, what we would call early capture strategy and capture planning. Talk about that for a minute, because I think that that's an interesting path into this business.
Yeah. So one of the reasons that I came out to visit you, Sean, was to get a better understanding of what opportunities may be available for landing gear services and wheel and brake services, because it was kind of combined at that point in time.
And these were the two largest divisions of this huge Fortune 500 company, just to clarify.
Yeah, and here's just a fun little snippet. You said that I had a program that was the biggest program that Goodrich had at the time. What's interesting, it was in parallel to the F-35 gear. So
That's right.
they ran at the same time. But anyway.
That's right.
So yeah, so I was trying to learn about the military market, how spares were purchased, how services were purchased, what opportunities were available, who the key players were up at Hill and at Tinker, because I think we also did a round to Tinker to meet some of the folks there.
These were big customers and the company had not worked with these customers for a lot of years at that point.
Yep. So we were trying to just get our foot in the door to see what sort of opportunities were available so that we could begin to grow that military service and military spares market within landing gear and wheel and brake at Goodrich.
Right. So one of the reasons that I was so interested in having you as our first real guest on this podcast was in the last episode, we talked a lot about the early days of LSI and even prior to the formation of LSI. As we're celebrating our 50-year anniversary this year, I really wanted to set a foundation for what the company looked like in its early days and why the company was founded. You have this very interesting perspective that you were part of this next generation, the next class of LSI executives that really had not had that connection to the past. You heard all the stories. You knew Jerry prior to him passing, but you really did not have that connection with the legacy principles. Most of the principles were gone. In fact, all of the principles were gone when you joined the company. You saw the company through a very different perspective. And over the last 20 years, you have such a unique perspective, not only because we are married, but also because you didn't have that relationship with the founding members. You saw this evolution in a lot of the acquisitions over that 20-year period of time. Talk about once you joined the company, what was your impression? I know you were very interested in the company's history. By that time, the company was almost 30 years old when you had joined the company. Talk about some of your early days with the company and your overall impression. And I'd like your thoughts on that era of LSI, which I really categorize as this next generation of the company's history.
Okay. So first of all, LSI was always an extremely impressive organization to me. I don't know how to say this, but when I was at Goodrich, I was on track to be an executive at Goodrich. I just had to stick it out for a few more years and I would have had a very high level job. And once I was introduced.
Sorry to interrupt you. When you left the company, the entire leadership from the CEO, president down could not believe you were leaving this path. You were on track to be a division president or, some executive at corporate headquarters. So everybody was just floored that you had left this incredible path to join this consulting company.
Yeah. So I was on this great path and
then you joined LSI.
Yeah. And I was liked by the leadership and I learned so much when I was at Goodrich and I had the benefit of having the eyes and ears of the executive team, which gave me a lot of opportunities to have a view at a much higher level than somebody in my position would normally have too. So those were incredible experiences. But when I was introduced to LSI, I was immediately impressed. It was the way that you, Sean, presented yourself. It was how everybody in your office presented themselves from the moment I walked in the door and the receptionist got up to greet me and shake my hand and take my coat and get me something to drink. It was just this amazing professional environment. And it was clear that you had a very close relationship with all of your employees. cared about your employees, wanted to do the right thing for your employees, as well as for your clients, and of course the military, which was mainly focused on the Air Force at that time. So it was an impressive enough organization that I left this wonderful career at Goodrich and jumped over the fence for this tiny little company in Utah. And oh, by the way, I didn't even know where Utah was. I knew it was, quote unquote, one of those square states. But yeah, I just moved out here from the Midwest. I was in Cleveland. So I left my family, I left everything and moved out here. But that's the type of impact that LSI had on me. And it was always about just this overall quality of work, quality of workforce, quality of the product that we were delivering. It was a very, very impressive organization, and people knew what they were doing. People, every single one of the employees that worked for LSI when I started there they were impressive in their own right. And frankly, I was a fish out of water. I came from the commercial side of the business and, didn't know one government acronym. So I was starting from scratch and I felt like the dumbest person in the room a lot of times. But yeah, it was just an extremely impressive organization and tiny. We weren't in the office that we're in now. We were in an office building. I think it's like a quarter of a mile down the street. And yeah, tiny, but a great, great company.
Before we go into your thoughts over the last 20 years, I want you to talk about, you've heard a lot of the legends and myths of LSI, and you've said to me so many times over the last 20 years about how I've continued to wrestle with LSI of the past, and talk about what kind of myths and legends that you have heard and is part of your story, being now an executive with LSI for nearly 20 years.
Well, the biggest myth is that you sleep in your tie at night. And I can attest that that's not true. But
has that ever happened before?
Hey, probably. Yeah, it has. I'm sure. I guess, people talk about the staying up till the wee hours of the night to get a proposal in. And it was literally an all hands on deck effort back then. We had, 10, 15, 20 people in the office, some of those part-time. And when there was something that had to get done, nobody even questioned canceling their plans, calling their spouse or calling their kids and saying, I'm not going to make it home tonight. And we would work all night on something. That's the truth. Everybody was always in a tie. Everybody was always in their best dress. If a client walked in the door, somebody had better be out of their chair to greet them, shake their hand, get them a cup of coffee. And nobody was above doing that. It was all about the client and the customer focus.
Absolutely. How about the legends and some of that history? You've heard a lot of the myths of the foundation of LSI. I mean, what sticks out in your mind as prior to you joining, what do you envision the company was like in those early days 50 years ago?
Well, I think in the early days, just based on a number of stories from before I joined, it sounded like it was a party with a lot of hard work, a lot of smoking, a lot of drinking, a lot of crusty retired military guys sitting around, trying to figure out how they could make a buck for their clients, but, always focus on the same common goal. I was able to work with some of those guys that were there when Jerry was there. Brent Parrish, Paul Larson, of course, Corianne has been, she was a fixture of this organization for years and years and was your right-hand person for a long time. And yeah, it was interesting to hear some of the stories. And when I joined, I felt like, wow, things have really changed from the good old days. But when I think about how things have changed from when I joined to now, I think there's even bigger changes now.
It's more dramatic now. Yeah, I agree with you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But when I first joined, the guys, some of the legends of the company, Brent Parrish, Paul Larson, like I said, Mo Goodrich, Tom Miner, Gene Hathenbrook, every morning, those guys would be sitting around having a cup of coffee, looking at Fed Biz Ops it was paper. It was a paper that somebody printed out every morning, and those guys would be the first ones to look at it, and they'd stick their initial on it, and then it would get circulated around the office. And that's how you were to identify opportunities for your clients. And
so let me stop you. Okay. So even this is what's funny is that this was even later in the evolution of business development. So it was the Commerce Business Daily. We called it the CBD, Commerce Business Daily. It was published every day by law and by the federal acquisition regulations. All organizations were required to publish an announcement in the Commerce Business Daily of any planned acquisition that was over a certain threshold. And also that installation was mandated to post the opportunity, and that there was a fair amount of time that interested companies could come in and determine, does the company have the credentials and capability to respond to this? So even prior, I think it's funny you called it Fed Biz Ops. I mean, there's 3 iterations since then. It was the Commerce Business Daily published every day, and it was a ritual. We were looking at the Commerce Business Daily every single day, the entire organization, everyone in the company, and also the team at the various installations. By the time you joined, we probably had 15 installations by then. Everybody that was resident at our offices at the various installations around the country would go in, and there was a bid board. They would look at every posted opportunity on that bid board in every installation. So, and we're going to talk some more about that history in these later episodes, but you're right. It was a ritual to look at every opportunity emanating from every installation where we had offices every single day.
One other thing that I thought was interesting from a business development standpoint and a capture standpoint is the guys I mentioned, Paul and Brent and Mo and Tom and Gene, they would go to, and I'm doing little quote things with my fingers, they would go to coffee every morning, to coffee. And they would have coffee up on base with everybody. And that's how we did a lot of our business intelligence. And that's how we did a lot of our capture work. So if your client had a question for you, you'd let those guys know this is what they need to talk about at coffee in the morning. And this is the type of information you need to obtain. And it is so much, obviously so much different now, especially now. But yeah, people were conversing a lot more, and they were more willing to share information that would help the base, much more willing then than they are now.
Absolutely. We're going to come back to that. Let me put a bookmark there. What I think is interesting about your perspective is, and I want you to talk about the last 20 years since you joined LSI. You have served in almost every single position in the company. I can't think of a position, an executive position in the company where you didn't serve at some point. I'm interested in your perspective of the company from 20 years ago until now. Talk about the various eras of the company since you joined.
So when I joined, LSI had recently won 2 major contracts that significantly changed the organization. One of them was Sean, you purchased Aerospace Support Technologies, which
ASP.
Came with a huge ground support equipment contract at Hill.
Right.
And prior to that, you had won the CAL FIRE logistical support contract in 2001, I believe. Yep. So that was fairly new. We were 3 years in when I joined the company. So there was this shift from being this little tiny consulting company to all of a sudden having, 100 employees up at Hill Air Force Base that were wrench turners and mechanic type people. And then another 25 people in California supporting the California firefighting fleet. So I think at that time you were in this growth mode of still trying to get your legs underneath you, and how do we best use the experiences that we're gaining from this age contract and the Cal Fire contract to continue to grow. One thing that I can say has been consistent ever since I started here, and it's your need, and I don't even want to say want, it's your need to grow the company. Regardless of the positions that I've served in, operations, business development, finance, there has always been a focus of growth and how are we going to get there. I mean, I feel like it's always been expected by you that everybody in the organization looks for that. So even at a time when LSI had just won these giant contracts that had, I'm guessing, doubled or maybe tripled your revenue, you wanted more. How are we going to use these to get more contracts? And that's kind of what I walked into when I first started working for LSI was, Catherine, how are you going to take what we've done at Cal Fire and grow it so we can have more of these contracts? And how are you going to take what we've done with this ground support equipment maintenance contract at Hill and grow it so we can have more of those?
You have seen a lot of the acquisitions over the last 20 years. There were 13 acquisitions, plus we started a number of companies. So not only did the company grow organically, as you had mentioned, but also through these acquisitions. Talk about that era of acquiring and assimilating a lot of that workforce and workload of these various companies.
So, I mentioned these two big contracts when I started in 2004. One of my first most horrific tasks that I had when I started working here was to put the landing gear prime vendor contract proposal together. And remember, I'm not a military or government workload type of person. I was coming from the commercial world. I mean, I hadn't even seen one of these monstrous RFPs before. Somehow it was thrown over the fence and it became my responsibility.
Can I stop you there for a second? So just some context. We were working, our client was your former employer, and they had tasked us to win this business, which was a multi-billion-dollar opportunity. And we had been working on it, I think, even before you had joined the company. I want to say that the concept for this program started, in the late 1990s or maybe 2000. I can't quite remember, but this had been going on. The capture work for this had been going on for years before the RFP dropped. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, that's true. It was called something different. I think it was called SLIC.
Yep.
When I started, people were talking about SLIC. So anyway, we started to go after this giant proposal or giant opportunity, which required this ridiculously huge proposal. And I was in charge of it. And I really didn't know what I was doing. And I went to Sean and I said, hey, I need some help. I don't know what to do. I need some help. I'm doing everything I can, but I'm really not an expert at government proposals. And so that's when we started talking to Shipley. Right. And we hired Shipley to help us. And then you bought them. So,
and that was an interesting time. They had some of the proposal subject matter experts working for them that we wanted. And I developed a relationship with Steve Shipley, who sadly we just lost Steve a few weeks ago at the time of this recording, but had spent a lot of time with Steve and maybe had worked more closely with Steve than anybody else during that period of time. So yeah, very interesting time in the company's history. Talk about that. Talk about what that looked like and how that integrated into the organization.
So recall how long the negotiations went on between you and Steve Shipley, but I know it was quite some time, probably a year or so, 18 months maybe. And yeah, during that time, we were experiencing a tremendous amount of growth.
Yep.
We were getting inklings that we were going to be one of the prime vendors on this giant landing gear contract that we had prepared a proposal for. Sean, you were purchasing Shipley, which was a huge, huge organization. And you had also just purchased Gary Strong's company.
How and
How?
Eagle,
Yeah, a couple years before. So
who we also just lost.
yeah, Gary
It's,
Strong and Steve Shipley, unfortunately, have both
it's
passed.
it's an interesting time right now, as you know, for me, where a lot of our competitors who we had acquired, the principals this year have passed away. We lost Steve Shipley a few weeks ago. We just lost Dave Kendall, Gary Strong earlier this year, and a lot of other really great business development thought leaders in the industry. As we're celebrating this 50 years of our company's history, sadly, we've lost some of the leaders that had founded companies that we had later acquired. You're right. It's to reflect on that. It is an interesting time.
Yeah, it is. So, yeah, at the time of all this growth, we were in that little tiny office building down the street. And I remember we kept taking over different parts of the office building.
We had the whole building at one time.
Yeah, and then it turned, what we used to have one tiny little suite, and then we ended up with the whole entire building and somebody kind of like taking up an office or two from us. But yeah, and then this was about the time when you decided you were going to purchase a building, which is the building that we're sitting in now, just a quarter mile away from the other office where I started. And that was a huge, huge undertaking. This was a big purchase, a big stretch. And yeah, we're still here today.
You know, we could talk a lot about some of the legacy companies of LSI, including Shipley, and we will on some future episodes. What did you see as we transition from this company of a few hundred people to the company, the consulting business that we've built in the last 20 years? What, as I said, you have this interesting perspective that not only were you an executive in the company, but you also had to live with me during this time too. Talk about going through the recession, coming out of the recession. What was it like to live with me during that time and since?
Yeah, that was terrible. That was terrible. It was probably the most emotional period that I've seen you in your career to date. You were very emotional about it. I mean, obviously we were struggling just like every other business in the United States was struggling, and, had to make a lot of cuts in various places and brought everybody together. We brought everybody together and you explained to them why we had to do this. And, we were trying to keep as many people as possible. But yeah, it was horrible. It was stressful. It was sad. You with this mindset of always growing your company, that had to have been one of the hardest things for you, was to see your company start to shrink and not be able to take care of everybody that you had taken care of, the previous so many years. But it was a horribly emotional time.
So we had this exponential growth, and I mean, it was just this trajectory of growth was unbelievable. And then we get into the recession, and a lot of our clients are not around anymore. A lot of our longtime clients that comprised a lot of our revenue during that time, they don't even exist today. But you're right. It was a very emotional time. I mean, there were a lot of times that you and I would talk about strategy and how do we reinvent the LSI methodology. And what do you remember about that period? I mean, I've got my own thoughts on it, but.
I think that it changed our business permanently. I saw a major change in our business And when I say our business, I mean the consulting industry, business development consulting as a whole, changed it significantly when we had that crash in 2007. It went from the heydays of spending all kinds of cash on consultants and proposals, and some of these proposal guys being able to take advantage of customers, to boy, they really tightened the strings. And the days of 25, 50 person proposal teams were gone. And they expected one person to do the work of 5 or 6 that had previously done it. And yeah, I think it changed things significantly.
Remember, right on the heels of this, we had just finished a 2-year proposal engagement. It was the largest proposal engagement that we had ever worked. We billed the client $12 million for that proposal. For the proposal, we billed the client $12 million. We worked on that for 2 years. I don't think there's been a proposal in the industry that has been a $12 million proposal since that period of time. What do you remember about like I said, you and I would come home, and a lot of times we didn't see each other a lot during the day, and I might be traveling during the week, and I'd come home and talk with you about strategy. And what do you remember? You had given me a lot of guidance and recommendations, but was there a turning point in that kind of dark era of the company's history that you remember was the point where you said, okay, this is really exciting, and we started down a new path?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember some of the new clients we brought on about that time, but I do remember, I think it was about 2010, in the fall of 2010 is when things started to turn around again. And the reason I remember that, you're going to laugh at this, is because we finally did a company.
Yeah, that's right.
Offsite. We took everybody on a cruise.
Yeah, that's right.
And everybody was just kind of dipping their toe in the water. Is this okay? Can we do this? And so that, I think that was when it started to rebound. And I'm trying to remember, I'm thinking that may have been the time when we had brought on DRS and Northrop. I think those were 2 of the big ones that we were working with at that time. We had also
we were working with Lockheed.
Sorry?
We were working with Lockheed.
Yeah.
We were doing.
And I think that was also the time when we won the Tinker ground support equipment maintenance contract.
Yep.
So some things started to come back, and things started to look up again. But yeah, it was about 3 years before they started to come back.
I want to move forward from that point, but during that 3-year period of time, any one thing stand out to you as you look back on that period during the recession, as we had lost a lot of, our clients they didn't survive it, and they didn't have cash to spend on growth. There was no money that companies were investing in. But do you remember anything in particular reminiscing about that period that stays with you to this day?
Well, I remember a lot of things. I'm not exactly sure what you want me to talk about. Frankly, I'm not even sure if you want me to talk about any of these. But
you can talk about anything you want. If you
a couple things I remember. I mean, it's scary. I am not an entrepreneur. I never have been, never will be. I don't think people realize how scary it is to be responsible for so many people within an organization. I'm like getting emotional talking about it because you were so emotional about it. But I remember saying to my brother, who is also an entrepreneur, geez, I wonder what's going to happen. We had this house that we had just bought, and this building that we had just bought. And I was terrified because, I was used to working for GM or Goodrich that always had money. And my brother said, Sean's a smart guy. He'll figure it out. And I was terrified. And I'm sure, Sean, you were terrified too, but you never let anybody see that. And you always found a way to keep going and make it through the tough time. And then again, just forge forward with how are we going to get bigger now? And it's impressive. It was scary. I distinctly remember our meeting with our employees, which was horrible. And everybody take pay cuts and that weren't laid off. And we took significant pay cuts. And I remember telling my brother, I don't know how we're going to get through this one. And he just, like it was nothing. He said, well, Sean's a smart guy. He'll figure it out. So yeah, it was awful. It was terrible.
You and I didn't take a paycheck for 2 years. That was an interesting time. But you said something interesting. Yeah, you were really afraid. I look back on that. There was no question in my mind that we were going to get through this, that we were going to find a solution. And I think that that's a lot about what we do. Is the reason that we've been successful in supporting our clients all of these years is that we, no matter what adversity or obstacle is in front of us, we're going to find a way through that, and we're going to make that happen. We did that as a company. So that's an interesting perspective. Okay, so we get through the recession and the Shipley divestiture, which was emotional as well. And what do you remember after that? We sort of had this emergence and a renaissance. And I felt like coming out of that, the recession, and you said it correctly, we started working with some amazing clients and doing some incredible things. What do you remember coming in that emergence out of the recession and into this new trajectory of growth?
So one of our newest programs was the LGPVC program. So we had built up a team of people to manage that program, which was something that we had never done before. And we had a great team of people that led us down this path to develop all these different processes and to ensure that, we got the majority. There were 4 prime contractors on this contract, and we were doing very well with winning most of the orders and had the best quality metrics. So that was one piece of it. That was also the time when I was in charge of business development directly with the federal government. And I had a team of people that I loved working with. Trevor Hedges, who is the biggest character in the world and still is.
So talented. And Chuck McQuitty, who ran Aerospace Support Technologies. And that's when we won the Tinker Award. Yep.
So it was just, it was that was fun. That was one of the most enjoyable times that I've had at the company, was that 3-year stretch of time. It was just fun. It was fun leading BD. It was fun having a group of people that were fun to work with. It was fun to see this new LGPVC team busting their butts every single day, trying to stand up this organization and create these processes that we'd never had before. We had to get ISO self-certified, and we were just in this territory of, we didn't know what we were doing, but we were going to figure out how to make it work. And yeah, it was fun. It was a really fun time.
Any other thoughts over the last few years? As you reflect on the last 2 or 3 years of the company's history, the really recent history in our 50-year history, what thoughts or memories do you have that's recent?
We had that great stint with all the workforce development. We had several workforce development contracts.
Social impact work
that was, that just stopped a few years ago.
And continues to grow. That's a huge growth area for the company. And we just won, as I think we just won a new contract with the Department of Labor, which I'm really excited about. Big 5-year contract.
Yeah. So that's been exciting. When COVID hit, we didn't know what was going to happen. We thought it was going to be another, because I'm always the pessimist, I thought it was going to be another 2007. So I freaked out. But it turned out to help us. It has expanded our business, because all these companies that had lost their revenue with commercial aerospace wanted to try to to get into the government area. And additionally, you have diversified the company so significantly over the past several years that, the consulting business is just a piece of our company. We have this workforce development stuff. We have the state of Utah stuff. We have the Cal Fire stuff. So it's just been, so if one part of our business is hit, we've still got all these other areas that can carry it.
I remember telling you, maybe you remember this conversation, that I said to you that I'll never have our company in a position where we are at risk or where we're reliant on a specific industry, on a specific client. We're not going to have a concentration anywhere in the company. And I think about that still. That really drives a lot of my strategy and thinking still to this day. And you're right. I think we've done a good job of diversifying outside of Department of Defense into Fed Civ, into a lot of commercial nonprofits. We're doing some really interesting things, probably more interesting sample of work than I can ever remember. And I think in the history of our company right now, it's exciting and very interesting. So I said I wanted to bookmark some of the work that you did. One of the things that I have said to our team as we build out these podcasts is I want to talk about this science. We've talked a lot about history. This has been fun for me and for you and I to talk about, reminisce about the last 20 years of the company's history and your history. And there was a lot that we didn't talk about that I'd like to explore on a future episode. But one of the things that I really want us to deliver to our listeners and to our clients is some skills. If you're a business development executive in our industry and you want to learn from the thought leadership of our industry, what kind of advice would you have for executives? You've worked with a lot of executives over the last 20 years with Fortune 500 companies as your clients, with small startup companies. You've worked with federal, state, and municipal entities. What I think has been so amazing is that, and I really, Catherine, I see you as a thought leader in our industry. You have won billions of dollars of business, including, you talked about some of the organic business. I think one of the first big programs that you won was a $1.5 billion. And you've done multiple billions of dollars of business since that time over the last 20 years. What do you think about when you're building your strategy, and how do you approach a large opportunity like some of the big opportunities that you've won in your portfolio?
Well, I guess if approaching a new opportunity in terms of a big contract with the federal government is, it's different in the way that I approach an opportunity with a client. I think the biggest thing, the most important thing to remember when you're working with a potential new client is to listen to them, listen to what they want, and just understand that you may not be able to force fit a solution that you've created for a different client into this client. So I think that the number one rule that I always try to abide by is listen to what the client wants. And
listen to your customer, listen to the customer. What is it that the customer wants? And we see that a lot, right? We're working with a client, we're telling the client that the customer has a specific outcome. They have a specific requirement. Listen to the customer's requirements. Okay, so you start there. What is it that the customer wants? And how do you get the customer to tell you that?
Well, I usually just ask them, so what is it that you're looking for? What do you want? Or what is your end goal? And, if they can't express what they want, they can only express an end goal of, we've been in 8A and we're losing our 8A and we don't want to be a subcontractor. We want to be a prime contractor. So that's what we want. We want to be a prime contractor. Well,
Yeah.
then it's up to me to figure out a way to give them a path to get there. So I engage other people in the organization that I believe have much more expertise on this than I do. And we come together and we develop a plan to present to the client. But it all starts with listening to what they want or what their end goal is.
I think one of your real talents is pipeline development. Talk about your philosophy around pipeline development. I think you're amazing at pipeline development.
A lot of that just comes from me talking with people, like I said, people that are much more familiar with the specific service or product that a potential client is offering. A lot of times I'll do some research on my own to figure out what NAICS code the product or service falls in, and I'll poke around in the resources that we have to try to find out what the names of contracts are, and then turn it over to the research people that are much better at that than I am, and ask them to put a pipeline together. But at the same time, I like to talk to our subject matter experts to say, I've got this client that does this. Do you see any sort of application at Hill? Or do you see any sort of application at NavAir or at AmCom? What do you think we could do for this client? I mean, and you just have to talk to people. We have so many smart people that work for us, and I use all of them. I'm always talking to our people because I don't know how to do it on my own.
One of the things that you do so well, and this is an anomaly in our business, you know how to work the relationship, the capture, and you're also an incredible proposal manager, an incredible proposal strategist. You have really worked some incredible, complicated, you managed a huge 4,000 page proposal recently that I thought was incredible work, some of the best work our company has ever produced. What do you think about when you work a proposal? You're really good at transitioning out of that capture phase into proposal development. When you put on that armor of, all right, I'm gonna build out a 4,000 page proposal, what are you thinking about? How do you go about at a high level in working a complex proposal like that?
Well, I guess the first thing you talked about transitioning from capture to proposal. So the first thing is taking the gold nuggets that you developed in the capture plan, looking at what the RFP is requiring and figuring out how you're going to fit those differentiators and those little nuggets into the very prescriptive document that you have to put together. I guess the other thing that I think about is if I'm managing this and I can have whomever I want on it, who are the people that I trust, who are the people that I know are going to do a good job, who are the people that, I know can write about aircraft maintenance or IT. I guess I like to have a team of really good people around me.
It's critical, and you're so good at it. One of the things that not a lot of people know this, you mentioned that you had worked for General Motors at one point in your career. And one of my favorite stories to tell about you is that you were the third shift lead for the floor at GM, and you were responsible for this whole team of production leads at GM. You have such an incredible ability to manage your time, and I watch you build proposals, especially complex proposals, where you have, it's almost like a production facility that you're managing, just like you were on the floor of GM, where you have the ability to manage cells and that you hit these milestones and deliverables. And I know you hate waiting to the last minute. One of your real talents is ensuring that you hit these various milestones that the team has established, and that it's good, that it's quality. And maybe just an observation, maybe that was something that you picked up working for GM on the floor as the third shift lead and interfacing with the union during that time. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know why I'm such a stickler for milestones and time and due dates, but I am a stickler for it. And I don't even like to be late. I don't like to be 5 minutes late for something, even if it's a social thing. I just have this, I don't know. I just, if I tell somebody something's going to be done at a specific time, I want it to be done. And if I create a schedule, the reason why the schedule was created based on those dates is because you're exactly right. I can't stand waiting till the last minute. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. I don't know. Maybe it had something to do with the third shift work I did. I don't know, but that was brutal work. But I don't know. But yeah, I am a stickler for dates and milestones.
Just like trying to get proposal work out of a team. It's the same type of brutal work. So Catherine, thank you for doing this. I know that you didn't want to do it and that, this isn't something that you were looking forward to, but this was really fun for me. I hope it was for you as well. I don't tell you this enough, how much I admire your work, and that I really believe you are one of the thought leaders in our industry, that you have such an ability to do it all. Because you've done it all, you are an incredible practitioner. You're an incredible strategist. You can still manage and write complex proposals and build win themes. And you're just incredible. And I hope you're really proud of the work that you've done over the last 20 years in the capture work, pipeline development, in proposal development, and even execution, the strategy piece. You really have this innate talent in the industry, and I admire that about you. I admire your work. You've got an incredible portfolio. Hope you're proud of it. I am. I'm so proud to have worked with you all of these years. It hasn't been easy, but I've learned a lot. Anything else that you have to say before we wrap up?
No, I don't think so.
So we'll do some more of these as we continue to celebrate our 50-year anniversary and explore some of the best practices in our industry. As I said, Catherine really has this unique perspective and long history working complex opportunities and capturing new business. So thank you, Catherine. So for all of those that are listening, if you're interested in learning more about this episode, or if you have an interest in learning more about LSI, please reach our team at social, SOCIAL, at lsiwins.com. And we can send you some additional information on this episode or in various disciplines throughout the company. Thanks, everyone.